Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming. I make that about past. I'd like to welcome you all to this presentation on how to fail upwards, possibly. My name is Emily Harford. I'm a chartered engineer and I work for the UK Atomic Energy Authority. So this presentation, I'm going to explain what fusion is really quickly. If you want some more detail on that, you need to tune into the other webinars, but hopefully I'll tell you enough to explain what the UKAEA do. Then I'll take you through the career path for how to become a chartered engineer and why the way I did it is a bit unorthodox. So to introduce the UKAEA, the United Kingdom Atomic Energy Authority is a UK government research organisation responsible for the development of nuclear fusion power, which is quite a fancy sentence. So let's talk about why we need to do that. At the moment, we produce quite a lot of power around the world, and you can see from this graph on the left, this unit is billion tons of oil equivalent, which I have to admit is sort of meaningless for me, and I imagine it's relatively meaningless for everyone else. But it's basically, you can see how the demands on our energy consumption are going up and up and up. And they're growing even in the sectors where we really should be expecting those to decrease. Now we have this understanding of climate change. At the top, you've got renewables, which I think is a bit of a strange word because it sort of implies that we're running out of carbon-based fuels. But the truth is closer that the excessive use of carbon-based fuels is damaging for the environment and for our health. Even if we counted things that are completely free from classical fossil fuels, like hydroelectric, for example, we're still not free from environmental damage. Those hydroelectric dams have an enormous impact on their ecosystem. Okay, so I'm just going to show you another graph here. This graph, I think, helps understand better because you've put here the population against our energy demands. So this inset graph, our world population in billions, and as we go further into the future, there's a spread on that curve somewhere between 12 and 9 billion. And on this curve, we've got the demand in energy. Again, it's sort of in billion tons of oil equivalent against time. So, and again, because we're going into the future, those are kind of maybes with a bit of spread on them. But however you want to look at it, as the world population is hurtling towards 10 billion, the energy demands that we have are increasing as well, especially as we try to manage climate change. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about what fusion is, and it's what happens in the sun. And it basically occurs when two things are squished together so hard they become the same thing. And fusion is a quite simple process. It needs three things. It needs density, some incredible temperatures, and some confinement time. So let's look at some of the temperatures first. So the surface temperature of the sun and the core temperature of the sun are phenomenally different. The surface temperature being about 5,000 degrees, but the core temperature of the sun is 15 million degrees. And one of the reasons the sun is so good at fusion is that other thing, that confinement time. The sun confinement time is in billions of years. Now, just take a moment here. I've said the word billion a lot, and I really want to give you some context for what billion means. So if we turn it into seconds, so 1 million seconds was last week, and 1 billion seconds was the USSR still existed. Billion is a really big number. And if you wanted to come into trillion is like 33,000 BC. I have a Q&A that someone is unable to hear me. Emily, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm going to carry on as if you all can then. Okay, let's move on to kind of what's happening in the sun in terms of fusion. So fusion is when you occurs in plasma, and plasma is a state of matter in which it's got so hot that the outer electrons of an atom have been stripped away. It's effectively the fourth state of matter. So you get solids, which are cold, and you add heat and you get a liquid, and you add heat and you get a gas, and you add heat and you get plasma. And because all of the electrons have been stripped away by energy, heat, they are the same thing. They have the same charge, and like two ends of a magnet, they don't want to go together, they want to ping apart. But you also know that inside an atomic nucleus are lots of protons, which are the positively charged particle. So the strong nuclear charge helps protons stay together, and that's when they get close enough that they'll just stick. And it's called the strong nuclear charge, sorry, the strong nuclear force. And that holds atoms together. So if you're able to throw two positively charged protons together hard enough, they'll stick. And that's basically fusion, is making two things that don't want to stick together. And when fusion happens, energy is thrown out. And that's why we want to do fusion as an energy source, because it's a really good way of getting energy, a really, really good way. Okay, now, lots of pictures on this page. This little guy here, that's JET. JET exists now on the UKAEA site. And JET holds the world record for fusion production, and the efficiency of JET is about 67%. So that means you're putting more energy in than you're getting out. ITER is being built in the south of France, and we're expecting the efficiency of ITER to be about 1,000%. So 10 times more energy out than you get in. And then following on from ITER will be something called DEMO. Now DEMO is basically more than one reactor. This is a picture of what the European demo is going to look like, but because ITER is an international collaboration, there are a lot of countries that have demo plans. Now, the shape of JET and ITER and demo are like a ring donut. It's called a torus, but it's a big circle with a circle spun around it. You get a donut. We also have another reactor that's going through some upgrades called MAST, which stands for mega amp spherical tokamak. And it makes more of a chord apple shape. And it's a different shape of plasma, and you get different energy ratios, and you get a denser plasma with a smaller machine relative to the donut shaped one. And moving on from MAST is STEP, which is a UK government research program to put fusion on the grid. And that will be with a spherical tokamak for energy production. You're going to love our acronyms. We certainly do. Okay, now on to the bit that you're all here for, which is me talking about me. A chartered engineer is a certificate from the Engineering Council. And the Engineering Council of the UK have some minimum expectations of a chartered engineer, and these are actually internationally recognized. These have been agreed all over the world. So if you're a chartered engineer in the UK and you go to Germany, or you go to Canada, or you go to India, or you go to South Africa, or whatever, wherever you go and you say, I'm a chartered engineer, that should be recognized as a minimum standard of competence and skill and knowledge. That's made up of the appropriate qualification, a certain amount of experience, and being able to prove that your experience and your qualification are relevant. Okay, so we're going to do this in stages. I'm going to start with the qualification. There's me, a much skinnier little weirdo, definitely wearing my older sister's clothes. I'm going to take you back to my A-level results day. This was back when A levels and AS levels were split, and when A levels were still modular, which meant that you could resit parts of your AS levels. Because my AS levels also did not go very well. I sat 13 exams that summer, which you should not do. Don't do that. That is a terrible idea, genuinely. Don't do that, even though you probably can't anymore. I really think that you should take a year out. Anyway, so this is kind of how desperate I was. I really understood that to do an engineering degree, I needed A's and B's. My AS levels were, let me think, C, C, D, E, and one of those C's was in English literature, which I was not taking further. And I'm sat there with the brown results envelope, and I'm in the side of the hall, and have not opened the envelope. And my head of sixth form like walks past like 10 or 15 meters away, just shouts so the whole room can hear, "Yes, Emily, we're going to need to have a chat about your results later." I haven't even opened this. And I can guarantee you I did not chat to her later. So somehow I still have to get these accredited qualifications if I want to end up being a chartered engineer, and I've been wanting to be an engineer since I was about 14. So I call my universities, and Huddersfield will still take me despite my grades. But I didn't really want to go to Huddersfield. So I did a foundation year in science and engineering, and I did a quick Google for foundation years in science and engineering, or foundation years in engineering, and you can do them in a lot of places. And obviously I went to the best place. I went to Loughborough. I did a foundation year, and at the end of the foundation year, you're put onto the undergraduate bachelor's in engineering. I had 2 chances after that to move to the master's. And I really want to highlight that at the end of my first year and at the end of my second year, who were both opportunities for me to move from the bachelor's to the master's degree, my grades weren't good enough. And in fact, by the time I had my B.Eng Hons in mechanical engineering, my grades weren't good enough to do the postgraduate course I wanted to do either. And the only reason I got my postgraduate master's is because the course director had been my lecturer and knew that I could perform well enough to do the master's despite what my academic grades looked like. This ended up being 5 years at university. A lot of engineering students will do 4 or 5 years anyway, because a year in industries are very popular, and I didn't do one, but I actually think I would endorse trying that. Certainly for the break, definitely for the experience. And some people end up with job offers for when they graduate. Okay, so here we go. We've got the qualifications. So here's what's next. You've got to go and get some experience. I graduated during the 07-09 financial crash, which meant that there weren't very many jobs. Graduating scheme applications are often automated at the early stages, which means that if you get a 2-2, they don't want to see you, even if you then have a postgraduate degree, because there's nowhere to put that you have a postgraduate degree. So you go into career fairs and you're saying to people, I've got a 2-2, but I got an MSc, and they're like, oh, great, that's great. And then you go to their application, and I did 150, you were automatically rejected. Because graduate schemes are so popular, entry-level jobs are rare, and even rarer during a financial crunch. And they tend not to pay as well as grad schemes, because they don't have to. So my first ever job out of university was working for Wix, the kitchens and bathroom supplier, because you take the job that's there. Now, my first engineering job was working in switchgear, which are these guys. These mechanisms, they change their state, using one of the stick guys. There's a very long stick for this one. It's a really long stick, but you move them between their states. Effectively, you send a technician out with a stick. These guys on the top of the pole, you must have all seen these. They're just on or off. These guys have like 4 states. And part of my job there was to start doing remote state changing. And changing the state remotely was easier. Sending back a positive report of what the state was now was less straightforward. But that was quite good fun, actually. Working in what counts as medium voltage, which is everything above 450 volts to 15,000 volts, was quite interesting. Then I worked in medical implants. The company I worked for had a specialism in limb salvage, which sounds very Victor Frankenstein, but the idea was that you came to that company to keep a limb that would otherwise be amputated. So we're talking about long bones. These guys are your standard case. So this fits in the tibia. That is a hip and proximal femur. That looks like a shoulder to me. That's a distal femur and a knee. So long bones. So nice standard cases, fairly standard anatomy. I worked in patient-specific cases for people who don't fall into that category, and that was most often children. And what we focused on was osteopathic oncology, which is cancers of the bone. So when you don't have long bones, you're doing something much more complex, taking out, this is a pelvis. So that's the hip joint, which has been eaten away. So you cut away the diseased bone and replace it with titanium. But here's a bigger case study. So your bone is not supposed to look fizzy. So this whole section has a cancer in it. So you're cutting that whole thing out. And without these specialist prostheses, you're losing the leg all the way up to your hip. But instead, by designing a prosthesis that can put a bolt through into the hip, you can have a much shorter stem. So that's just 9 centimeters. It's not very big. And you can replace all the way down to the knee joint, and then the patient in this state would have almost normal movement. And the choice between almost normal movement and I don't have a leg was quite straightforward for most people. So after that, I moved into commercial aerospace. And here's my plane. It's the Airbus A350 extra wide body. She's a little chunky, little belly here. And I designed galley kitchens, which are subject to FDA regulations. Because it's an international plane, you have to follow the strictest rules and regulations. And for food preparation, that was basically the FDA. But even designing something like a shallow drain sink is not straightforward. Planes fly at about 7 degrees nose up in normal conditions. And if your galley is facing forwards or facing backwards or facing inwards, that sink still needs to drain in almost all circumstances. So even though it was simple, it was also not, because the object that you were putting your sink in would move around. My apologies. So next you take all of that together and you have to prove it in an application. So that's what's called UK spec, which is standard for professional engineering competence. And this is part of that international framework. There are 5 areas in which to demonstrate your ability, and that is 5 essays to prove that your experience mattered, that you've worked hard to be better than the day you were when you graduated. So it's your use of engineering knowledge and understanding, your contribution to design, development, manufacture, construction, commissioning, operation, or maintenance of products, equipment, processes, systems, and services. You have to accept and exercise personal responsibility, use effective communication and interpersonal skills, and make a personal commitment to the appropriate code of professional conduct, recognizing obligations to society, the profession, and the environment. So the Engineering Council oversees all engineering in the UK, but a lot of engineers will have a professional body that is a bit more specific. So I'm registered with the Institute of Mechanical Engineers, which is IMechE, but there's also IChemE for chemical engineers, and the IET, which is Institute for something technicians, engineering technicians or technology. There's the IOM3, which is the Institute of Materials, Mining and Minerals. There's IXPE, which is the Institute of Explosives Engineers. And frankly, if I'd known that existed 10 years ago, I'd have a very different career now. But all engineers have to demonstrate UK spec in a way that is relevant to their individual career. But again, this is still not as straightforward as you'd like. A lot of the benefit of going on a graduate scheme is that you get what's called a monitored professional development scheme. So that's what the IMechE call it, but a lot of institutions will have an equivalent, ensuring that for your graduate scheme to be accredited, which the UKAEA grad schemes are, they have to fit into providing you a proper mentor to guide you through your early development. So I mentor 2 engineers and will be responsible for helping them fill in their applications as we go along and maintain their logs of professional development. But I didn't have anyone to do that with me or for me. I had obstructive management. My director of engineering, when I was going to apply for my chartership, was the only chartered engineer in my department, and refused to sign the form to say he'd sponsor me. You need two sponsors to be chartered. Only one of them has to be chartered, but you need a chartered engineer to sign, yes, this is true and accurate, and this person could also be a chartered engineer. And my director of engineering refused. He didn't say no, because then I could have gone to HR. He said, they have my address, I'm a member. And then I went back and said, he says you've got his address and I don't need to put it on the form. And they said, no, he needs to put his address on the form. And then he said, no, I won't give you my address. So I had to find somebody else who didn't work with me to sign my form. And another benefit of having gone through a graduate scheme is that in theory, graduate schemes are targeted and tailored to ensure that you have the appropriate even development around those 5 competencies. Having gone through having a terrible time with my A-levels, really not being very good at university, trying to get a job during a financial crash, trying to keep a job during a financial crash, and then trying to persuade some strange sexist engineers to sign my form that I'd had to put together myself without any guidance. Somehow I ended up being a chartered engineer at the end of it. Okay, so quick tour of my time at UKAEA. 2 big projects I did. I worked on the European Spallation Source, which is a big science project. It will be the brightest neutron source on the planet when it's finished. And the idea is that you can do very cool science with neutrons for medical technology and materials development. But what happens when you produce neutrons is you end up with a lot of very radiologically active waste. So the active cells facility here was what I was working on, and it's a world first because it is the first hot cell, they call them, with no windows and no human access. This is entirely automated, which is very cool. And I worked on these these big doors and these big doors and this big door before I moved on. And the second big project I worked on is the demo remote handling and tooling. So the European demo reactor I showed you earlier, to give you a concept of size, this big curly purple blanket segment here is 80 tons. And at that sort of size, those things deform under their own mass. It's somewhere between a banana and a slinky. So you have to have a very clever crane with a great deal of, all of these axes of movement. So there's rotation axis here, and up and down here, and here, and here, and here, and here. So this is it's more than a 6-axis manipulator. And you have to do that almost blind and with very little clearance. And then the last thing is this laser worm. So you can't weld from the outside of the pipes in demo because of access reasons. So to join this pipe here, you need to weld it together from the inside, which I am really hoping I can show you. Yeah. So this is just a VR demonstration of this tool. So while you're watching this, one of the best things about my job now is that I have never been bored. Not in the whole time I've worked at UKAEA, and I have moved on from being a designer to the office of the chief engineer. And the idea of the office of the chief engineer at UKAEA is to ensure engineering excellence across every department. And I am incredibly proud to have, as a slightly miserable 18-year-old, to have come so far from my head of sixth form embarrassing me in front of a hall full of people, to principal engineer at the UKAEA, working in the office of the chief engineer. Plus, I made this laser welder, and we have done real tests with it, and it works. People wouldn't, we've done the impossible so far, and I think more is yet to come. I'm more than happy to sit here for a while to talk to you about how to be an engineer, how I became an engineer, what you might want to do, your paths through, and just to highlight that some of the best engineers I worked with don't have degrees. They came up as apprentices. So, there are a lot of ways of being an engineer, and the only thing that really matters is that you care about the job. So I'm gonna wait for questions now. Okay, so I've got a question. How important was charter status for your application to UKAEA? For the pay grade I'm at now, it's a requirement. For the pay grade I started on, it wasn't, but I think it certainly helped. It certainly helped because while my career had been in highly regulated fields, which is important if you want to work in nuclear robotics, I didn't have any immediately transferable skills. I had some skills in sheet metal working and vac forming polymers, and you don't do a lot of that when you're making a nuclear robot. So it helps to demonstrate that I had the skill set to learn, I think. Yeah, I mean, my job is very cool. I literally get to say I make nuclear robots, although not so much anymore. Hello, everyone. Okay, so I've got a question about how do many people join with nuclear industry experience? No, and yes. It's a bit. We have some people who have some experience that's very relevant. So they've worked in the nuclear fission industry, which is normal nuclear power plants. That's nuclear fission, where you have very big atoms and they fall over slowly and make water hot. That's how they work. But also we've had people whose background were, medical devices like me, or automotive. And it's about whether you have the skill set for, the transferable skills that you'd want to be looking at. I have a complicated question about the neutral effect for the welding system in demo. I don't know. I've worked with some welding specialists, and I know that as we move forward with as they move forward, because I'm not working on it anymore, with the laser welding for demo, they're going to have to look at a lot of different things, like sagging under gravity, and how to weld things that are much thicker. Some of the pipes are going to be like 15 mil thick, so they've got a lot of things to look at. I hope that helps. Has being a woman in engineering made it more difficult for you to make career progress? Yes. I have to be honest, but I think things are changing. I do think it's getting better, because like all the time I see more women joining engineering, and I think it's really important that women be part of engineering, because diversity of thought helps to prevent mistakes. And my favorite example of that is when Apple brought out like iHealth or Apple Health or whatever on one of their fancy pants iPhones. It didn't have a way of tracking your period. And I absolutely guarantee you, if they've had more than one woman in the room working on that app, they would have. So yeah, being a woman in engineering has made it more difficult for me to make career progress. I think I have to be better or different than some of my colleagues, but also it's been getting easier for me to make progress as I get better at my job, and also as time goes on. So I hope that answers your question, Claire. What advice would I give to 18-year-old Emily? Oh, I don't know. I think I'd just be like, try not to worry too much. It's all going to be fine. Mostly that's the advice I want to give to most 18-year-olds. Or even younger. It's probably going to be fine. You have more time than you think to get what you want. Hello, Felix says, during your career, did you find times where you felt like you'd reached the limit or the cap of the responsibilities? Up until recently, yeah, but basically every time I did that, I changed jobs. That's why I in the first 5 years I worked for 3 or 4 different places. Since coming to UKAEA, I've tried to pay a bit more attention to like what I want. In the early stages of my career, or any engineering career, I mean, just having had a go and learning new things is easier. The further on in your career, I'm moving out of being an early career engineer now, you need to pay a bit more attention about what you want to go on for. So I hope that helps. Hello, Mohammed. Does UKAEA provide career development path, such as training and courses? Oh yeah. The thing that absolutely I can endorse for UKAEA is they are very into developing their people. I work places they're like, no, we're not paying for that course or anything. I've just had, I've literally, I moved into the office of the chief engineer this month. I've been there for a fortnight and they've just dropped £800 for me to do a career specific course. That has has a very tenuous link. It's basically it's an IET course in engineering ethics. So it's not even like I'm learning how to do finite element analysis or computational fluid dynamics or something very applicable. It's this very amorphous thing, but people are, management all over UKAEA are very into developing their people. Can endorse conferences all the time. Yeah, absolutely, definitely happens. Hello, Banksy. Probably not that Banksy. My son, who's 16, mad on chemistry and the periodic table, wants to work at CERN. Good choice. Are there open days? Could you experience a day in the life of? Obviously, the current situation is difficult, but the authority does offer work experience and open days, and you can probably contact through the social media to speak to someone in comms and PR about how those might happen going forward. We do take student placements, we take year in industry placements, so there are ways of getting into UKAEA as a younger person. Okay, what's next after, what's next after Chartered Engineer? So, the next level up from the Engineering Council is being a fellow, and it's basically and further demonstration of your development and learning. It has higher expectations on the amount of responsibility you've held, but it is definitely something I should start looking at with a bit more of a paying attention eye, to be honest, because I'm starting to move towards maybe applying for that. Hello, Ali. Left university 22B Eng. What are your options? Okay, so there is a level called an incorporated engineer, which you can do with a bachelor's, and is also internationally recognized, also comes out of the Engineering Council, and you can do that, and that's fine. I have colleagues who are incorporated engineers. You could start work and then see if your job will sponsor you to do a postgraduate degree that is relevant to your employer. You could look at the OU. There are some government grants for postgraduate degrees. It really is about, see, the thing is I always wanted to be a chartered engineer, but actually the more important thing is what my job is. So you could give it a minute and see how it goes, because you can take a break and do it later. And then I believe there is also a way of demonstrating appropriate academic learning without doing a master's as well. So there's no rush to do a master's. I hope that helps. You could probably find me by, like, yeah, I think that sounds right to me. Okay. What are the main problems with the realization of nuclear fusion energy from a technical point of view? Okay, I did a whole talk on this. What I will say is that fusion energy is the most difficult engineering undertaking of all time throughout all of human history. The ISS was easier. The pyramids were easier. Everything we have ever done has been easier than what we're trying to do now. But I think it is absolutely worth it, because I believe it will change the species and the way we interact with people, with each other on a global level. And I think it's absolutely essential for us to do it. There are a lot of problems. We can make fusion happen. It's making fusion happen for long enough to get the energy out that's difficult. But a lot of the research that is happening, it is already, like, it's just is feeding into making those things happen. There are worldwide efforts into making nuclear fusion energy a reality. And there are, I want to say, South Korea or Singapore. I want to say South Korea has put it in their constitution to make a fusion energy power plant this century. But I might be wrong about that, because I haven't read into that for this presentation. Okay. Are there many foreigners working at CCFE? Yes. It's a very international employer. We have lots of people from all over the world. And there's another question about visa issues if you're from India. No, we have lots of Indian nationals working there. You know, look at our vacancies and have a go. Hello, Neil. Thanks for the talk. It's very interesting. Country registers an Eng Tech, and I do not have a degree. I wonder if you have any experience from. I think, as I said for Ali, I think there are ways of getting to chartered engineering by demonstrate that you've done the academic learning in another way. But I suspect you will need at least one degree. It's probably easier. Than not doing a degree. But again, being a chartered engineer is not an essential part of being a good engineer. David says the IO3E, the IOME does a one-day explanation on what's required to become a fellow. Oh, great, good. Thanks very much. Started a physics and mathematics degree. What would I need to do to get a career in fusion technology? Hi, IP. Some of the best engineers I know did physics degrees. Some of the worst people I work with are also physicists. But I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. You could, okay, so what you need to, there's the two things. If you're doing physics and mathematics and you want to stay there, that's great. So you could look at plasma physics, you could look at modeling of plasmas, and there's all sorts of fancy pants physics around modeling of plasmas. We had a PhD student who had come in from modeling like solar flares. So those, I mean, that's a thing. You need to look into the people, you know, working on fusion technology local to you, and look at the things they research, and then focus on that. That's what I do. Björsen, how far might be the UK be from launching a fusion power plant? It's going to be a hot minute. I'm hoping, like, I really would like it to be this century. I suspect that some big breakthroughs are going to start happening around the 2040s and 2050s. And then Ali, like, there's a connection here. So Ali asked about the state of funding for nuclear fusion. So the more funding we get, the faster we do it. Because that's just how science works. You have to pay people to do jobs. You have to pay for expensive lasers and weird materials like beryllium and you know, tritium, which does not occur naturally, and like ask people to come up with ways of handling these things and doing science on them. Like, more money means it happens quicker. And again, this is going to come out of my memory, but I believe that like ITER is costing about £20 million, and putting people on Mars is about £50 million. And I think that Qatar have spent 150 million on the Football World Cup. So it's not like the money's not there. You know, I like sport and I like art, but, you know, Jeff Bezos could lose half of all his money and solve world hunger and still be a billionaire. So I think part of what we need to look at is how we fund scientific research, and how we tax incredibly rich people. Just to remind everyone, million seconds last week, billion seconds USSR, billionaire. There's no, it's more money than anyone can have, and know what to do with. So I hope that helps. And then last one, Mohammed, I don't know. In terms of functional safety per IET 61511, safety integrity levels, they, okay, so I can't speak specifically about MAST, I've never worked on it, but specifically in terms of safety integrity level, that's more to do with specific systems. So your safety integrity level will have to be tailored to the risk. So it's more to do with whether you could, like, your access, your access control will probably need to be SIL rated to get near the vessel for fusion power, because of the amount of neutrons that are person melting. You have to keep them away. You have to keep people away. But when the machine is off, there are not many neutrons. So you know, the SIL rating. So that's one of the things that makes fusion power safe. But the SIL ratings will be for different systems and will vary depending on, you know, what they're for. I can honestly say, I think, like, we were talking about SIL ratings when I was working on the hot cell for ESS, and that was that was extremely hot in terms of radiological activity, but the SIL rating was still, I think, at the lowest level if we went with it at all, and I can't remember what we did because that wasn't my area. The control engineer was dealing with that. Okay, I have now answered all of the questions that I've had here. Anything else? Okay. I hope that you are all entertained. Okay, one more. Yes, yeah, Ryan, yes. Corona is ruining everything, and we are still doing as much as we can at home in terms of, like, design work and stuff. But yeah, there have been some, the experimental campaign on JET has been suspended, and there is lots of work on physical plant on site that has been suspended because of the lockdown for COVID. I suspect that we're going to go through another financial crisis. I am hoping that because we are backed by the Bank of England, that it's not going to be, it won't affect our funding. But yeah, there will be a physical delay in terms of things that are going on, but hopefully it will only be a matter of months before we're back doing what we were doing. Okay. Yeah, okay, that sounds like everyone's done listening to me talk now. Thank you all very much for coming.